Not there's anything wrong with green, it's Earth Day. But over time, you know the things there are things that you'll have to do differently and better in the future. So it is in a way hitting a moving target. But we do this, again, the goal of the moving target is not to harass development. It's to say there's something new that we should be doing that's widely recognized as best practice, that's effective, that helps us build better software and do better cost avoidance. So for example, we score how many people have completed training. One of the things that we look at is automated test tools. So it can't really be pass-fail because different development groups have different tool usage. Not all tools are useful for all groups. And just the fact that you bought something and installed it doesn't give you a green, right? And you want people to be using it to be sophisticated, cleaning up and fixing things appropriately. Okay, so when we report this, it comes not only with what does green, red, and yellow mean. As I mentioned, we do review it. We make sure that the people who run the lines of business see this before the chief executive does. Now, why do we do that? I don't want anyone to get a phone call from our chief executive going, I see that you're blah, blah in this cell. What do you know about this? The last thing you want to do, the goal here is not putting people on report, although I've used it for that. It's so that everybody knows where we are and everyone's looking at the same scorecard. And in particular, we always try to give people a chance to improve something before we go to the executives. I can't wait to get to the slide with the story where I talk about how we did this. Okay, one other thing we do, and then I'll get to my stories. So from time to time, I talked about our oversight committee. When we have those, occasionally something will get raised as a particular area of interest, meaning, well, we have a problem here, so we will do particular focused metrics around that, that we will report back to our executives. One of them had to do with secure coding training. I'll talk about that in a minute. And another one, which we've now institutionalized, is what we call an M&A alignment. Well, what does that mean? We realized that when we bought a company, we wanted to bring them into alignment quickly. So part of the way to do that was to come up with a really quick sort of checklist where we could survey what are they doing, what are they not doing, and we could use that to drive a compliance plan. So then we now institutionalized that. So within, as soon as we buy a company, we have plugged into our 100-day process, which means that we're getting some of these assurance items done or institutionalized a lot faster, and we score that. And that's another way to help reinforce our culture. But we initially did that just as a one-off exercise for management. So let me talk about the training, because this is a success story. We had a requirement for secure coding training for several years. And when I say requirement, I meant requirement. Almost everybody in development had to take it. And this is a source of arguments. I'm a product manager. Why do I need to take this? I don't write code. Because it goes to our core values, what the requirement is, and product managers actually have a fair say on what goes into a product and how it gets done. So everybody was supposed to have to take it. Maybe doc writers didn't, but pretty much anyone else, if you touched code, wrote code, worked on code, code got waved under your nose, you had to take this class. And it was online, it was modularized, and still there were people who found reasons not to take it. It's like having a baby or getting a new puppy. There is never a good time to do it, just deal with it. And yet we couldn't get groups to do it. So finally, and by the way, the little color-coded thing didn't work so well. So finally, one of the guys who worked for me decided he was going to do a bar chart. And I told development groups, we're going to report this back to management, senior management has very pointed comments. In 2 months, you've had a couple of years to do this, get on with it, get your numbers up. Now, some of the development groups took that as an opportunity, and they went back and exhorted, they said, we need to do this, they made compliance. Some of them, as you'll see from this chart, this is what I reported before, and this is after I gave them 2 months' notice. This is what I reported to senior management. Now, I can tell you what the exact conversation went like, because nothing shows how what you're doing or not doing compared to your competitors like a bar chart. So one of the executives looked at this. See that group that's down around 38%? Quote, that is not right. They can all come in over the weekend to take that class, or they can look for new jobs. So once the word got out that someone was really concerned about this, what a surprise. because I went back and said some people weren't very happy with this. Within about, I'd say 4 months later, it was actually more like about 6 weeks, because once the word got out that somebody was really interested in this, they got with the program. Now, it shouldn't have taken that, in my opinion. And by the way, more on this group, the 38% group, more on them later. Looks good, doesn't it? By the way, we didn't just adjust the bar so it looks nice, they actually did complete this, all right? So I didn't fudge the numbers. So, again, we have centralized policy, we distribute enforcement down through individual groups, and that kind of get back to, I mentioned one group, let me back up a little bit. We can institutionalize this, and we really try to. And I mentioned we try to make it easy for people to do the right things. It still gets back to someone has to choose to do it. So you can lead a horse to water, you can't necessarily force them to drink. And that actually does create a challenge. I'm sure a lot of you have. What do you do when somebody just didn't get it? You try to create these structures that will force them to get it, but ultimately someone has to choose to do it, or someone has to force them to do it. I really hate to see it get to that point. But the goal here, in most cases, this has worked well. We've had security leads who were very entrepreneurial. As I mentioned, the training numbers. Most of the leads use as an opportunity to go out to their groups and exhort them to do this and get their management backing. And if they had trouble getting management backing, which was almost never the case, then I would go to their senior executives and say, this is really important, I appreciate your support. But occasionally, you have problems where someone doesn't do this. Now, this structure in general works well. You know, we understand, particularly that no one does everything perfectly. They don't do it overnight. We give people time to do it. We give them support to do it. I always view it as, I tell my team, I do not assume malice or incompetence if there's another explanation. Meaning, if somebody is having a difficulty, and we now actually have found I'll talk about this in a minute, if someone is struggling, we try to find a way to bring them into alignment by giving them kind of remedial help. And if sometimes that means I'll go to their management and say this is very important, maybe they need more resources, to try to, again, support a group, not just beat them up. And this works well. I don't think a model where you're a central security group or the experts and you become the bottleneck. I've told my team repeatedly, my goal in life is is in a way to be out of a job because we get so good at this. They don't need us anymore, or we move into strictly a compliance role where there's so much expertise and development that very little has to come back to us. That is the only scalable way to do it. Yeah, and I think it works well, and there will still be a role for compliance to make sure that we're doing the right thing, but we'll be less hands-on and much more, are we just taking temperature of are we doing the right things? So we have a small group that actually supports a very large development organization. And getting larger all the time as we make acquisitions. So, case study. This is a discussion I don't really want to have with a customer. I mentioned this earlier. So we had it was an unpleasant conversation with a customer about a particular product. By the way, they had already experienced intellectual property exfiltration. Had nothing to do with us, by the way. But needless to say, if you've had your intellectual property taken out of your network, let's say they were a little sensitive about security, and who can blame them? So they were very security aware. They had looked at one of our products. They were not happy, to say the least. I'll spare you the rest of the details, with sort of the security worthiness of the product. And their comment was, look, it's your brand now. We expect more from you. You know, who can argue with that? So I took this as an opportunity. I thought, well, what can I do to go back to them besides just say we're working on it? So what we did is we looked at their scorecard, had this group scorecard, and what I originally wanted to do in the interest of transparency, I wasn't going to give them a copy of our scorecard because that's an internal thing, but I thought, well, okay, I'll write out what this group is doing and not doing, at least know what's being done and not done. And as I'm starting to write this out, I'm saying, you know, this doesn't look very good to me. They should do more. Why aren't they doing more? So we looked at it, and I said, you know, I'm now uncomfortable enough, I will take my resource, my ethical hacking team, and with the product team's permission, we scheduled an ethical hack. So they looked at it to say the least. They ripped it. And we took that and we created a cure plan. So the cure plan didn't just include fix this bug, the ethical hacking team. We looked at what is it going to take? This team seems to be struggling with making compliance with what does it mean to be an Oracle product. They're not getting with the assurance program.